My sister's abuser got custody of her children because she couldn't afford a lawyer. 3 years later, I graduated law school to bring them home. I'll never forget sitting in that courtroom watching the system crush my sister Emma. When she finally escaped her controlling husband James, she had exactly $43 to her name. No access to their accounts, no credit cards, and no recent work history because he'd insisted she stay home with their daughters. The temporary restraining order lasted only 14 days. At the hearing, James showed up with a private attorney in an expensive suit. Emma had dark circles under her eyes from working night shifts at a gas station while living in a shelter, and a free pamphlet from the courthouse titled Representing Yourself. The judge barely acknowledged Emma's existence, speaking directly to James' lawyer instead. When she tried describing the emotional abuse and financial control, the judge cut her off. "We're here about the restraining order, not your marriage counseling issues." Without enough evidence of physical violence, her restraining order was dismissed. Within a month, James filed for full custody, claiming Emma was unstable and living a transient lifestyle. I watched turned back row as my sister tried representing herself against James's attorney, who presented carefully capper stories about her abandonment of the family home and mental instability. Emma's hands shook as she tried explaining she left because of his abuse. The judge awarded James temporary custody, allowing Emma supervised visits twice a month at $75 per HR's money. She didn't have a minimum wage that night. Emma collapsed in my apartment, sobbing until she couldn't breathe. The judge looked at me like I was garbage, she whispered. "James wins because he has money for a lawyer." The next morning, I withdrew from my graduate education program and applied to law school. For 3 years, I lived on student loans while Emma fought to rebuild her life. She took paralegal courses at community college, saved every text and document related to James or the girls, and attended every expensive supervised visit she could afford, sometimes choosing between seeing her children and buying groceries. Meanwhile, James made sure the girls had new clothes whenever social workers evaluated. I told the court Kessler Emma had abandoned them for a party SL. When Emma missed phone calls because she was working multiple jobs to afford a stable home, James documented it as lack of interest. The family court system wasn't designed for domestic abuse survivors without financial resources fighting opponents who controlled all the evidence. I graduated in the top 10% of my class with a focus on family law. On my first case, filing for custody modification for my sister this time was different. When James's attorney tried portraying Emma as unstable, I presented 3 years of meticulous documentation, her apartment lease, steady employment records, completed credit classes, and loans that every contact attempt James had blocked. I submitted financial records showing how James had opened credit cards in Emma's name during a marriage, destroying her credit while portraying himself as the responsible parent. I included witness statements from shelter workers who had observed Emma's tireless efforts despite overwhelming obstacles. Most importantly, I requested the judge interview the girls by now 8 and 10 as in chambers. I clicked their coached performances during supervised visits. They spoke honestly about missing their mother and feeling afraid to upset their father. 3 weeks later, the judge's decision arrived. Emma received full custody with James granted supervised visitation until he completed a domestic violence intervention program. When Emma's daughters finally came home, the younger one asked, "Is this forever, Allah?" Didi said, "You didn't want us." Emma looked at me before answering her daughter. Sometimes the truth takes a little longer to come out, but it always does. The system remains broken. Emma succeeded only because someone who loved her dedicated years to mastering the legal tools that should have protected her from the beginning. For every Emma who finds justice, thousands still fight against impossible odds. My sister doesn't tell people I became a lawyer for her. But every domestic violence survivor who walks into Miss sliding scale, Banlin Law Apprentice, hears her story and gets the legal representation that made all the difference.